This is the Community of Inquiry Framework. My name is Mona Guerra, and this project was completed for EDTC 8371. The Community of Inquiry theorists, Dr. Randy Garrison, Dr. Terry Anderson, and Dr. Walter Archer developed the Community of Inquiry framework or theory as they worked together at the University of Alberta during a 5-year period. During this time period, the theorists were part of the Faculty of Extension. The Faculty of Extension was tasked with creating a partly online graduate program in communications and technology. Therefore, they focused their research interests in the direction of content and teaching and technology support issues that were associated with that new program. So, Garrison, Anderson, and Archer in 1999 developed the Community of Inquiry framework to help them identify how social presence, cognitive presence, and teaching presence interact for a successful higher education experience as they were helping to develop this online program. They developed a model as seen on the right, and this framework assumes that learning occurs within the community of inquiry through the interaction of those three core elements. And that's what this graphic is supposed to show, is how the social presence, cognitive presence, and teaching presence all overlap to form, in the middle right there, the educational experience. Now, there are three core elements of the community of inquiry framework. The first core element is the cognitive presence. Cognitive presence is the extent to which learners are able to construct and confirm meaning through sustained reflection and discourse in a critical community of inquiry. According to the authors, this is a vital element in critical thinking. The second core element is social presence. Social presence is the ability of participants in a community of inquiry to project themselves socially and emotionally as real people through the medium of the communication being used. According to Garrison, Anderson, and Archer, when there are effective goals for the educational process, this makes the interaction enjoyable and personally fulfilling. So, therefore, the social presence is a direct contributor to the success of the experience. The third core element is the teaching presence. Teaching presence is the facilitation and direction of cognitive and social processes for the purpose of realizing personally meaningful and educationally worthwhile outcomes. According to the authors of the framework, this element supports and enhances the first two elements to help the learner reach their educational goal. So, what does the community of inquiry have to do with online learning? Well, the community of inquiry framework was developed specifically to address the needs of an online learning program for higher education. So, unlike other learning theories, the community of inquiry framework is deeply rooted in online learning. The community of inquiry framework serves as a model for the development of a successful online higher education course design. So, theoretically, instructors and institutions can use the framework when developing online coursework to ensure that the experience is both personally and educationally meaningful, which is important to have a worthwhile educational experience. Now we're going to look at the strengths of the community of inquiry framework. So, according to Bocher and Conrad, online courses are more of a bottom-up development and require learners to interact with each other and the content resources to construct knowledge. The authors go on to state that the focus for instructors shifts from preparing lectures to facilitating community building experiences, as well as monitoring and guiding student learning experiences. Now, these ideas align with the community of inquiry framework, which proves that the framework is a strong model for a successful online course development. Now, one of the greatest strengths of the community of inquiry framework is that it provides a means to study the dynamics of online learning communities of inquiry, both among and within the presences. This framework was developed in the idea that it would help guide further research. Now, if we look at the weaknesses of the community of inquiry framework, As noted by Rourke and Kanuka, the community of inquiry framework does not ensure that deep and meaningful learning occurs. Now, the authors would argue that the framework was designed for exploratory and descriptive studies since there were not many theoretical models for online learning at the time of conception. So, therefore, more research needs to be conducted as to whether the community of inquiry framework leads to increases in student understanding and achieving learning outcomes. Additionally, more research needs to be conducted in quantifying the degree of relationship between the three core elements. And lastly, there is not enough research to understand how this framework can be applied outside of higher education, such as K through 12 education, because this framework was specifically developed for higher education courses. Now, looking at the community of inquiry framework, the author's 1999 paper has been cited 8,052 times, and it continues to be cited as more and more educational institutions move their courses online. Even prior to COVID-19, many educational institutions understood that there is a greater need for online courses for their learners. However, the COVID-19 pandemic forced all educational institutions online. This caused an increase in the necessity of creating quality online courses to meet the learning needs of all students. Moreover, many K 12 schools were not prepared to move their traditional face-to-face classes to an online class platform. So, following the COVID-19 pandemic, schools found that there was a need to develop effective online coursework for all K 12 grade levels to meet the needs and demands of their stakeholders. What many schools found following the pandemic, once students returned to face classes, is there were students who preferred online courses. There were students who needed online courses, whether it was due to having to quarantine, or maybe they had a medical condition. There was many reasons why there was certain students that preferred online learning. And so, especially K through 12 public schools, they needed to find a way to keep being competitive with online schools that were becoming more popular and other school districts that were offering these online courses. And moreover, these online courses had to be good. They had to be worthwhile. They had to have the same impact as face-to-face classes, because we know that there was learning loss that occurred during the COVID-19 pandemic. So if schools were going to offer online courses, they had to ensure that those students taking those online courses did not fall further behind. So the Community of Inquiry framework provides a model for instructors and educational institutions for developing successful online courses. And this is important as more schools offer virtual courses, especially K through 12. Now, the more institutions that utilize the framework for their online courses, the greater the amount of data available to determine if the framework meets the educational goals and needs for students. One of the biggest weaknesses of this framework is the lack of data. We need data to determine if this framework provides meaningful learning. We need data to determine the degree of relationship between the core elements. So, the more college institutions that use this framework to develop their online courses, and especially the more K through 12 schools that use this framework to develop their online courses, the more data that's available to help understand the degree of effectiveness and the degree of relationship between the framework and the learning process, learning goals, and even the core elements within. Now, I believe that the framework will continue to serve as a starting point for future researchers looking to create an effective online coursework for all students. I think the framework is a great starting point. I think it's easy to follow. I think it gives everyone, educators and educational institutions alike, a place to go from and help build successful online programs that they can use for years to come. And these are my references.